It was from a very early age that I started making art. My grandfather was a portrait painter in Guadalajara, Mexico. I have two Mexican aunts, and one of them is a sculptor. And when I was little, I showed an interest in drawing, and they encouraged me to pursue it and take myself seriously. My grandfather gave me drawing and painting lessons in his studio, and my aunt took me to like every class she could. It was very immediate, kind of like who I was as a little kid. Something just kind of clicked when I started taking painting classes at Tufts, and I realized I would always wonder what could have been if I didn't pursue it. Even in the early stages of painting, like I could see that this was the thing that I wanted to focus on and be really serious about. I'm a maker. That's really where I'm in the zone. It's like a place that I feel the most like myself. I make surrealist landscapes that reference my Mexican-American heritage. At first, I started working with Mesoamerican figuration, deities for people like me who have kind of an ambiguous identity. There's this term in Mexican Spanish, it's a Mexican slang. It's called a pocho, and a pocho is someone who is a Chicano, but it's like someone who's neither really Mexican nor American. And that's kind of how I've always seen myself. I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, but I would go to Mexico almost every summer. Mexico was almost like another family member, and it was hugely formative for how my sister and I saw ourselves as slightly like outsiders, never entirely American or highly critical of the US, and always like ready to kind of go to Mexico and like experience this other culture. I started with these Mesoamerican figures and sort of creating my own version of them out of the mythology of Mayan and Aztec folklore, and then building my own figures that were kind of like irregular or like unwhole. And then I started kind of like looking around the figures and thinking like what kind of space they're inhabiting, and then just trying to explore that space. And that's kind of when the botanicals, the cactus started showing up. And I think they take on kind of a metaphor for a space of searching for belonging. So that ambiguity of identity is central to the work. The more I built out this landscape, the more I felt like this is really about a journey, and I'm inviting the viewer to come through it with me. And these figures are both trail markers, and they're indicators that you're on the path, but they can also warn you about possible dangers or the fate of it all, because I think there are elements of destiny and fate in the work, and sometimes they're there to keep you alert and aware. Like, this is not a dreaming space. This is a place somewhere in between Mexico and the US, somewhere between reality and imagination. And they might bring hope and some life, but they also remind you of the warnings and also potential demise. The paintings themselves are offerings, and the figures are also offerings to the gods. There's also a repetition of doubling up paintings that have two sets of eyes or two sets of noses. And these are indicators of like the possibility of another life. Or these are like the fate that was never executed. This is the other world that you didn't get to experience. The landscape for me is a place to explore. It's a place that I can build and create and also excavate. And I like to take snippets of places, references of places I've been in Mexico, and incorporate them into the imagery so that there's like some kind of place to land, some kind of reference to the real, and then build off of that. A lot of it really is from my travels in Mexico. I do take a lot of pictures when I'm traveling, and my partner and I do go to a lot of archaeological sites and ruins. The botanical gardens in Oaxaca were like a huge kind of turning point for me because I got to see these bisnaga cactus in real life and just be kind of like overwhelmed by them. The more I do this and the more I consume in real life and through reference photos, the more my imagination grows. And I think that that's a process that I had to at some point kind of commit to. I used to be a photorealist painter, and then at some point that just wasn't satisfying my creative needs. And I realized that like I had to focus on building my imagination. And I think that's one of the things about this landscape is like it invites me to create more of my own imagination. One of the things that I really hope comes across in the work is both this personal story and then the larger metaphors, the micro and the macro. The paintings themselves have a range of touches to invite the viewer to really come close and see the tiny details and then step back and see the bigger picture. Hopefully the viewer takes the time to experience those different shifts in approaches, and also maybe this is like somehow an uncanny experience that feels close to something that they would believe or something they believe they've experienced before, but then a little out of the range of possibility.